Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In his treatise, On Being a Busybody, one of the topics that Plutarch focuses in on is this tendency for people who suffer from this vice of curiosity, Polupragmosunēs, that we can translate as busybodiness or curiosity, to zero in on what has been concealed, what is not their business, what it is that people want to keep behind closed doors, keep secret. And he talks about this very funny incident where an Egyptian, is carrying something wrapped up, and then somebody says, "What are you carrying?" And he says, "That's why it's wrapped up. I don't want to reveal it to you." And typically, what is it that we're concealing? The stuff that we don't want other people to see. So the curious person seeks out not just anything that's hidden away, but the troubles, the kakon, the things that are bad, hidden away, kryptomena, or concealed, lanthanonta, for households or for important people, as the text shows us, right? So he's going to go on and he gives us two really interesting analogies here. The first one has to do with going into somebody's house where you could be very curious. And he says, it's not customary to walk into the house of someone else without at least first knocking on the door. Nowadays, we have doormen, people who actually stand at the door and say, "Whoa, what are you doing, buddy?" And we also, had door knockers that were to be struck at the door and give warning. Why? So that you wouldn't walk in on something that people in the house don't want you to see. And he gives you some prime examples of this. So you don't catch the mistress of the house or the unmarried daughter unawares. That is, seeing them in a condition that they don't want to be seen, perhaps getting dressed or, using the restroom or something like that. So outsiders shouldn't get to see that. Or a slave being punished, right? That's not somebody else's business. Or the maid servant screaming, right? Something upsetting them. And there might be a whole bunch of things that you don't want people to come into your house and look around and see. But this is exactly what the busybody wants to see. He says it's for these very things that the busybody slips in. Things that are best not shown to other people. Then he's got another very funny example. The winds that bother us are the ones that blow up our clothing. So remember too that in ancient times in the Mediterranean, it was not common for people to be wearing trousers. That was viewed as a northern barbarian thing. So people wore things that could easily be blown up by the wind. And what would that do? It exposed not just your legs, but your genitals or your butt or something like that. So, we laugh about that sort of thing. There's the famous, iconic movie clip where Marilyn Monroe is over a vent and, oh, it's so sexy. Well, in ancient times, that wasn't considered so good, right? So what does the busybody do? The busybody doesn't just, want to see what we've got underneath our clothes. They actually, as he's going to say, they strip off people's clothes. They pull off our garments, the mantles and tunics of those near them. And, going back to a household, their very walls. He flings the doors wide open and makes his way like a piercing wind through the maiden of tender skin and creeps out, seeking out with slanderous intent drunken revels and dances and all-night festivals, like Cleon in the comedy, his hands in Beggar Town, his mind's on Theft Town. He's going to go and say, so the mind of the busybody is at the same time in all these different places, in the mansions of the rich, in the hovels of the poor, in royal courts, in bridal chambers of the newlywed. He seeks out everybody's business, that of strangers, that of rulers. So, potentially the busybody wants to know anything that's being hidden away by somebody else. They don't care about the stuff that's out in the open. That's not interesting to them. They figure there's got to be some dirty little secret, some scandal that I can get at. So, I'll go check it out. I'll peer in the window. I'll sneak into the house, if we're talking about today, we're talking about snoops that would use all sorts of probably electronic devices and opportunities to get into places where they don't belong because they want to go everywhere. Now, that by itself is bad enough. Plutarch is going to point out, that's also kind of dangerous if you're going to inquire into other people's secrets. People don't want their secrets revealed. Why not? Because they're things that they would not just like to keep to themselves, but they figure are sort of shameful. And so he's got another great analogy here. He says that this is like somebody who would taste aconite through curiosity about its properties. He would find that he killed the taster before he got his taste, right? So we don't really worry about aconite, but think about drinking bleach. I wonder what this is like, or, rat poison or something along those lines. Let's try this out. Yeah, go ahead and try it out and you'll die. So that's the way it is with certain secrets. He also talks about those who scarily glance at sunbeams that we have and dare to gaze on the orb itself and rend its radiance apart, striving to force their way within. They wind up going blind. So some secrets you probably shouldn't be inquiring into. You shouldn't be so curious about. Don't get too close, we say, or you're going to get burned. And so he says that, we really don't want to seek out the vices of those who are more powerful than ourselves, because that's a way to get ourselves destroyed by those who are powerful. And he's got this great line about somebody who's suggested by King Lysimachus, right? Philippides, this comic poet, the king says, which of my possessions should I share with you? And he says, hey, anyone that you want to, but not your secrets. Why not your secrets? Because he knows that those who know the secrets of kings, the very powerful, are going to get themselves in trouble. And so Plutarch says, kings will show you the most pleasant and fitting attributes, banquets and wealths and festivals and favors. But if there's anything secret, stay away from it. The joy of a prosperous king is not concealed, nor is their laughter when they're happy, nor outlay on entertainment and favors. But it's time for alarm, or more literally, for fear, right? The word here, phoberon, it's fearful when there's something hidden away. What are those things that might be hidden away? He says something dark, something smiling, something unapproachable, a storehouse or treasury, thesaurus, of hidden wrath, orges, anger, right? Or the meditation of a punishment indicative of sullen or literally deep anger, baruthumon, right? Or the jealousy, here it's the jealousy of a wife. And, it's interesting. So it's zelotupia gunaikos. This could be the jealousy that a wife feels. This could also be the jealousy that one has about one's own wife as well. Or the suspicion against a son, or even distrust. Apistia, that's coming from the word meaning not, and then pistis, trust or confidence of a friend. These are all things a king might be concealing. And if they're holding those things back, don't dig into them. Stay away from that. And now, we don't have a lot of kings these days, but we might say your boss, your CEO of a company, a celebrity who's got their public-facing visage that they're showing everybody, and then they've got what they've got deep inside. And maybe you don't want to go in there. It could be a rich and powerful friend even. Maybe don't inquire too deeply into what's happening with them. Don't be curious about that. Don't be a busybody about that, because it's not going to turn out well for you if you find the secret. A little bit later on, he is going to bring up something really interesting, a metaphor of, doctors, right? So he says, it's so painful for all of us, the revelation, bringing to light, anakalypsis, right? The bringing out of hiddenness of our own troubles, that many die rather than to reveal to physicians some hidden illness. And this is happening even today. There's people who are so ashamed of being sick in one way or another that they don't tell anybody about it. They keep it entirely to themselves because they feel that it's shameful. And, is it good to do that? No, because the doctor can actually help you out if you are sick. So he says that, imagine Herophilus or Erostratus or Asclepius himself, the god of medicine, when he was a mortal man caring about their drugs and instruments, calling at one house after another, and inquiring whether a man had an abscess or a woman a cancer. And yet the inquisitiveness of this profession is a salutary, literally a salvational thing, right? So these people are not busybodies in the sense that we're talking about here, but busybodies, what do? They seek out these matters, illnesses, and many others, all sorts of others that are still worse, and not to cure them, but just to expose them, to bring them to light. And he says, for this reason, they're rightly hated. Other people hate these busybodies. Misuntai, right? Dikaios. Dikaios means with justice. And he's going to go on and talk about another example, customs officials, right? We bring in our baggage and they start picking through our stuff. They are looking for concealed goods, but the law lets them do this, and they would lose by not doing so. Busybodies don't have any legal warrant, we might say, and they're going to actually ruin their own affairs, their own property, their own relationships. As he says, they ruin apolusi, right? They bring down into ruin, and they abandon, they set aside their own. Why? Because they're too focused on what's going on with other people, including these secrets that they want to bring to light. So it's bad for you to be a busybody and to try to ferret out everybody's secret little things. especially if those people happen to be powerful. There are some people who, it can be good for them to do, customs officials. We might say that perhaps kings might have some legitimate reason to do this, doctors especially, but other people who want to get in there and find out all the things that are hidden away, all the things that people want to conceal, they're not doing it for good reasons. It's motivated by this busybodiness or wrongful curiosity.